Go. So welcome, campers. This is the fourth and final day of the inaugural Sports Biz Career Exploration Camp. Kudos to everyone. I know this is a challenging time to be alive. It's a challenging time to be in high school. And it's a challenging time to try and get better and prepare professionally. So kudos to everyone for coming and showing up. Jarrod, we've had an awesome week. Campers have been super engaged. They've been completing assignments. They've been asking great questions. They've been following along. They've been connecting on social. So it's really been great. So all we can do is screw it up right now with this presentation. We're not worried about that at all, man. But I just want to say once again, thank you to all our campers. And then I want to introduce Jarrod. And Jarrod, it's just me and you on the chat today. So everyone else can drop in some questions and comments and stuff like that through the chat and also through the Q&A. I'll be monitoring that. I know you have a presentation, so I want to make sure that you can deliver that. I'll be monitoring that. So if you want, I can pull questions from there. Some folks like to just pull questions themselves. It's however you want to do it. I'm here to support you. But for the campers, just a bit of background. You know, one of the themes all week has been relationships. So this is a good example. Jarrod's another example of someone that we've met just through interactions over the course of the last couple of years. Like good people find other good people. And I think we met probably through shared connection, maybe something on LinkedIn, had coffee, had some great conversations. He's been really helpful with a number of our different college classes and also some other high school classes in the past. He's a good dude. He's a good person. He delivers a great message. And that's why we wanted to ask you to come today and kind of be the keynote on a great week. I think that the campers, you should be really excited about Jarrod's background, what he knows. He's got a diverse background, both as an athlete and entrepreneur and now working for an NFL team. But I think more than anything, Jarrod, I think you really know how to connect with young people, and that's why we wanted you to come today. And I think you connect with a really powerful, impactful message. So it's all about relationships. Who knows, 3 years ago when we'd meet at Rhino Market having coffee, you'd be speaking to hundreds of students across the country as part of this career exploration camp. I didn't know it, but I wanted to make sure I gave that kind of background. So Jarrod Barnes, take it away, buddy.
Awesome. Well, Patrick, thank you so much for the opportunity, and good morning, everyone. First, I just want to thank Patrick, Jeff, Vince, and the rest of the Sports Biz Camp team. Incredible opportunity. And guys, for you students who are tuning in, this is unprecedented, right? This has never been done before in this way. And I'm humbled to be part of this. I think this is an incredible opportunity, and excited to share just with you guys this morning a little bit about sports, a little bit about my background, but more so about you, right? And how each and every one of you can take this information that you've learned all week and heard from some incredible people, how you can take that information and really apply it to your life in a practical and tactical way, but also in a way that's going to benefit you and only accelerate your opportunity in future down the road. But first, Pat, I know you mentioned how we met in the first place, and sports is all about relationships. Guys, so you know how I actually met both Pat and Jeff. 3 years ago, I applied for a role at Johnson & Wales. I was going to, in a sense, be an adjunct professor for their sports management program. Didn't get the role at the time, didn't have necessarily the right qualifications for that, and I was a little bummed. But Jeff and Pat really made an effort to reach out and build that relationship, right? And it was unique, where what I thought was going to be an opportunity for me and face somewhat a level of rejection ended up being a great relationship, right? And so if there's anything I want you guys to take away from this presentation, from what we're going to talk about and jump into here in a second, is that sometimes the how of things happen is a lot different than you may think. And feel free to drop in questions as we get into our conversation. But keeping that why in these relationships, that's ultimately what's going to guide you along your career and allow you for the most success. So excited to jump in. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen right now, and we will get this thing going. Let's see here, full screen. Boom. All right, Pat, are we good? Can you see my screen? Thumbs up. Awesome. All right, so we're going to jump into it. And I'll give a little bit of my background, but the reason this morning, just as kind of a final message here, right, to talk about activating our potential. Activating our potential. As I mentioned before, you guys have heard from some incredible people this week. And how do you take that information? How do you apply it specifically in your career in sports? How do you apply it in life and everything in between, right? And I think right now why I chose really this as a topic is what our world needs the most outside of a COVID vaccine are people operating at their full potential, right? So what are some ways we can do that and take all this great information, take these relationships we formed over the past week and apply that? So a little bit about me, right? Just so you understand my background, where I'm coming from. Currently right now, I work for the LA Rams as our manager of former player services. I've been with the organization for about a year, and it's been an incredible opportunity. And one theme throughout my career that has been a staple, I think for me, has just been continuing to explore and pursue opportunity, right? We'll get in a little bit to identity and what that means, but for me, a word that describes me is an explorer, right? I'm a big Disney Plus guy. I have a Disney Plus subscription, and I love the Nat Geo pieces. And there was one guy, a seaman, who was a deep sea diver and exploring things, and his title when he came up on the screen was Explorer at Large. I'm like, I love it. I think this is amazing. And so for me, that's something I've always gravitated towards. Originally from Columbus, Ohio, fell in love with the game of football at a very young age. I started playing when I was 5 years old, and up in high school, I knew I wanted to play Division I football. I knew I wanted to be around the best. I wanted to find a way to get around the best. And I just kept exploring, kept pursuing opportunity, kept attending these camps, kept pushing myself as much as I could. Ended up having a chance to play football at the University of Louisville, graduated early, and became a grad transfer to Ohio State and played my last 2 years at Ohio State. And really, when I pursued my career in sports, I wanted to go play in the NFL, right? So as soon as my career was over, my college career was over, pursued the NFL, ended up not making an active roster. So I went back and started actually as a volunteer coach. That's how I got my start in sports, is worked for free, found ways to add value, and started as a volunteer coach. From there, spent about a year working at Clemson University in athletic administration, and then would actually go on to start a company called Prime U, where in a sense I met Patrick, Jeff, and the rest of the Sports Biz Camp team as well. And now I've been with the Rams for about a year. But a common theme in all of that has been just continuing to explore. And this is actually one of my favorite quotes from a gentleman named Greg McCown. He's the author of a book called Essentialism. Highly recommended. As you can see on the screen, spend as much time as possible exploring, listening, debating, questioning, and thinking. The purpose of exploration is to discern the vital few from the trivial many, right? And guys, we're living in this era now with social media, and there's so much information out there, right? There's so much out there that it can be overwhelming, and it's like, oh my gosh, what do I listen to? What's actually important to me? How do I actually use this information to get to where I want to go, right? And that's the purpose of exploring, the purpose of listening, debating, asking questions, all of these things, right? To find what is it that in a sense compels you the most, right? And so what we're going to talk about today, and I didn't want to miss this too, the image on the right, I told you I'm a big explorer. This is actually image last year, pre-COVID. Took a trip to Australia. It's something I always wanted to do as a kid. I was actually in Sydney, Australia, and just continuing to explore. It expanded my frame of reference, learned like all different sports. Didn't even know there were sports like netball and Australian rules football. That once things are safe, highly encourage you guys to continue to travel, get out of your comfort zone, and keep pushing those boundaries. And so today, what are we going to talk about today? Why is it important to understand how we can activate our potential, right? Because there's so much information available, in especially in sport, right? There's this common theme for those of you guys who are athletes, right? For me growing up, all I heard is, Jarrod, you need to grind more, just grind, just keep, work harder. And eventually your time to shine will come, right? That's for me how I was taught growing up. Just keep grinding. Well, to be honest, the effort is essential. That's so important that you guys continue to work hard, continue to put effort in. But without strategy, that doesn't always equate, the not equal sign for you math majors or mathematicians in the room. More effort does not always equal more execution, right? It's effort, and what we'll talk about here, plus strategy in order to get to your full potential. So what does that strategy actually look like? This is a graph here from a gentleman named Tim Berry. Tim Berry was previously a professor at Stanford Graduate School of Business and built what's called the planning pyramid. So today, what I really want to spend our time with in really taking all this information we learned this week to think about our strategy and how we're going to use this, how we're going to use this information, how we're going to use the relationships that we formed in order to make sure our effort actually equals opportunity in what we're doing here, right? And this is something for me as a high school student, as a middle school student, and even as a young college student, right? I didn't necessarily have. I was out here swinging, just I'm trying to meet all the people I can, read everything I can, which is great, but I didn't have a strategy. I wasn't able to hone in my effort in order to create the best possible result. And so what we're going to dive in today is not just strategy, but some practical tactics that we can use in order to create some milestones and metrics for us to, as you can see here on the pyramid, get to a level of execution or opportunity that we're looking for. And so it really starts with strategy. It starts with strategy. And what is the makeup of that strategy? Really, first, before we even think about career path, before we even think about goals, right? Sometimes we skip past understanding ourselves, understanding who we are as people, right? There's been, again, as we mentioned, so much information that's been presented to us. But how can we shift from just consuming that information to actually learning, and not just learning, but learning about ourselves? And for those of you who spent time in sports media breakouts this week, or esports, or the sports agencies, or sport for good, or sports marketing, all these things, right? Beginning to think about what have I learned this week? How does that affect me? What do I think about that? Right? It's one thing to consume information and just listen to it. It's another thing to digest it. Think about, okay, how does this make me feel? Is this something I really see myself gravitating towards? Right? Really understanding yourself and what that information means for you. And then two, taking that next step, like any superhero, right? Whether you're Superman, the Black Panther, right? You have to identify what your kryptonite is, right? We all have dreams and goals, but what are the things that are going to trip us up? I had the chance to play and work for Coach Urban Meyer at Ohio State in my career as an athlete. And something he would always say to us every week before our games, he would say, "Men, in order to win, we must first prevent losing," right? We can't even think about winning until we think what's actually going to trip us up. Where are we going to hurt ourselves before we can even advance to think about being a winner, right? So for you, what are things that have kind of caused you to get off track in the past? You know, for me, it's a small thing, but I had a bad habit of scrolling late at night on my phone, you know, and next thing I know, I'm up, it's midnight, and I wake up tired the next morning, right? It's a little thing, but then I'm tired the next morning, and it's this domino effect. Small thing of kryptonite. I gotta take my phone away at 9 p.m. I gotta put it down. I'll get to it the next morning, right? Small thing, but identifying what can trip you up. And then lastly, and most importantly, setting your GPS. Setting your GPS. All of you guys who use Apple Maps or Google Maps or MapQuest for the older crowd in the room. Set your GPS, beginning with the end in mind. In it may not necessarily be a role of where you want to go, but what type of life do you want to live? What type of legacy do you want to leave, right? Begin with the end in mind, and that's what's ultimately going to guide your GPS. Because I mentioned earlier, keeping the why and letting go of how that may happen. Guys, if you would have told me 5 years ago, Jarrod, you'll be working for the Los Angeles Rams, and you're going to move from Columbus, Ohio to Los Angeles, California, I would have been like, you're absolutely crazy. No way am I moving to Los Angeles. No way. That's like on the other side of the country, right? But I kept pursuing the why, and my GPS eventually would reroute, right? And the right people along the way would come in that path and keep advancing the path. So hope that can be helpful, but it really starts with strategy. I'm going to go back to that pyramid, the strategy, right? And that's what ultimately can guide how you're using this information, and what we'll talk about here as some tactics and practical ways to get through that. So I know I'm jumping in fast, but feel free to share questions in the chat. And Pat, stop me if there's questions. Would love to jump into that as well.
You're doing good, Jarrod. Keep going. There's a couple questions just related, like kind of to your start, but I think you've got a good flow. So let's keep it going.
Awesome. We'll keep it going then. Yeah. So guys, we move from strategy, right? We think at this high level, we're knowing ourselves, we're identifying things that can trip us up, we're setting our GPS, and now we transition to tactics, right? And for sports terminology, the strategy, it might be your team philosophy. The tactics are the plays you're calling, right? If that makes sense. We're translating some analogies here. And the real difference in tactics, it shows up in the details. It shows up in the details, right? And you're thinking about your career in sports and breaking into the industry. It's such a relational industry and a hyper-competitive industry, which is a great thing, but all the more reason to understand the details in order to really help yourself advance, stand out, in a sense, break into the industry. So what does that look like? Number one of the most important things each of you can do right now. You say, Jarrod, what can I do now? I'm a high school student or I'm a young college student and I don't have a ton of experience. What can I do? The number one and most important thing that you can do right now is assemble an analogy here called your board of directors. Who are your board of directors? These are advisors. These are mentors. These are professionals in the space who, in a sense, are demonstrating the qualities you hope to embody, right? Demonstrating the qualities you hope to embody. They're operating in roles or functions that you're aspiring to be in. And they're in different spaces and places that you, in a sense, hope to be, right? So how do you identify them? You reverse engineer that and ask those questions. And who are those people demonstrating those qualities of great leadership, right? You want to be a great leader? Go find great leaders, right? And find a way to meet them. You want to, in a sense, break into being a sports agent. Go find those sports agents. And then when you're asking those questions, even more at a minute level, what spaces are they in? Are there conferences that they're attending? Are there publications or newsletters that they're reading, right? And then how do you actually gain access to those people? Ask yourself, how can I help them? How can I help them? Is there a way I can add value, right? And so one thing I've found, the more intentional the questions you ask yourself or others, the more intentional the outcomes that are produced, right? So when you're thinking about assembling your board of directors and identifying who those people are, really think about those qualities that you hope to embody, those roles and functions you aspire to be in, and what spaces they're currently in, right? I'm going to give a shout out to Grant Robinson. Grant Robinson sent me a direct message on LinkedIn this morning. He said, "Hey, Jarrod, I'm really excited for the keynote. Grant, I appreciate that. It came in at like 5:30 in the morning over here on the West Coast, but I appreciate that, right? Grant, that tells me I'd love to follow up with you and just connect because you took the opportunity to shoot me a note, right? People in this industry, they want to help, but in order to actually activate your potential, to activate that opportunity, the first step is reaching out, right? So identifying those individuals and taking a moment to reach out."
Jarrod, can we stay on that tactic for one specific example? I think it's really great, and kudos to you, Grant. Well done, buddy. Who else? The hardest part is identifying these people that could be on your board of directors. So who else within the kind of the network of our high school students could be a member of the board of directors, and maybe just very specifically, how would you recommend that they recognize who that person could be, and then how they make contact with that person?
That's a great question. Great question. So in a practical sense, right, it may not necessarily be the vice president of business development at some sports franchise. This could be one of your coaches. This could be one of your teachers. This could be, someone in the community who is doing great things in the community, right? I think when you're trying to identify, who those individuals are, that's what I would really start with, that first question of who in kind of your circle that you've been around are demonstrating the qualities you hope to embody, right? One of my closest advisors and mentors and someone who is on my board of directors actually has no background in sports at all, right? But she's an individual who, in a sense, is an incredibly caring person, incredibly loving person, and does such an excellent job at leading people. She's actually just involved with a church I'm a part of. And even though she doesn't have a career in sports, she has some incredible qualities that I hope to embody. And so for me, I've sought out, okay, these are some people who are demonstrating that, right? How can I reach out to them? And Pat, to the second part of your question, it may start like we shared the example of Grant. It may start through LinkedIn. It might be Twitter, or it might even be showing up to a place when it's safe that they're at, right? And taking that opportunity to meet them.
Yeah, and I think, a couple of points I want to hammer home there. It's not assemble your board of it's directors. So there's multiple people that should be helping you out. And to Jarrod's point, we talked about diversity a lot, Jarrod, and the value and power of diversity really all week. So don't pick all people that do the same thing, right? Like mix in people with different perspectives because they're all supposed to be kind of your support and your team. And I think it's, Jarrod, you talk about who demonstrates the quality you hope to embody. I know that can be sometimes hard, like what quality, it's hard to self-analyze. One thing that I try to do, students, is if I see someone and they seem to love their job, like, why do you love your job? Like if they just are really good at it, if you have a really good teacher that has a lot of enthusiasm and clearly loves it, ask them that question, right? Or you have a coach or a boss. That's one way to identify the qualities you hope to embody or understand them is like, do they enjoy what they do, and do they bring that kind of energy and enthusiasm into whatever they're doing?
No, Pat, I appreciate that. I get excited, I get rolling, but it's very wise, right? And it's, again, what I've found is, and it may not necessarily always be the individual with the title, right? That's flashy. Oftentimes it's those individuals who love what they do. So that's a great point. So we're going to jump to what's another tactic, right? To you can not only assemble your board of directors, but really focus on the relationship and following through on follow-up. I'm sure you guys have heard this, but following up with individuals who you meet, who you connect with within 24 or 48 hours, right? Within a short window of time, absolutely critical. Sometimes when opportunity is presented, it can be like, oh my gosh, I had the chance to meet this individual. This is amazing. But we oftentimes forget to follow up. That's where the real opportunity is. And for those of you who've written handwritten notes or sent emails, that leaves such an incredible impact. That's a great place to start something you can tangibly do. Send an email, send a direct message, write a handwritten note. But a true relationship, that's what creates opportunity. And I'm pushing you guys on this. I know I'm giving some really some stuff that may be like, wow, this is a lot of work. This may be some higher level, but I truly believe sometimes when we hold ourselves to a standard that might be a little bit higher than our comfort level, eventually we're going to rise to that standard. So a practice that was shared with me early in my career was anytime a mentor or an advisor gives you advice, when you follow up, say not only thank you, but share with them on how you're utilizing that advice, right? Sometimes for me, early in my career as a young student, I was so grateful that people would, in a sense, take me under their wing, share expertise, but I didn't know how I could help them, right? We talked about earlier asking how I can help you. Sometimes the best thing you can do for a mentor or an advisor is use advice that they've given you and utilize that. And a practice that was shared with me as a more tactical way to do that is keep a Google sheet, an Excel sheet, a notepad, whatever it may be, right? A sheet in your notebook of people who you've met and the best advice they've given you. And make sure to revisit that, right? And I put in there every 6 months, it might be every month, revisiting things that you have learned. Sometimes it's not about learning new information. Sometimes it's about revisiting the information that you have already learned. Right? We talked about it earlier, the difference between learning and just consuming, right? Instead of just trying to always eat more, let's go back and really think about what we've already been presented. And how can you revisit that and follow up to then create that relationship, right? To share how that idea or concept has generated an impact in your life. I know that may be, again, very high level, but it's these practical and tactical tools and systems and processes that can really help you when you're trying to identify, okay, how am I creating a relationship? How, in a sense, can I learn and better understand sports as a whole, right? What does that actually look like? And what are some ways I can tactically do that? And really building these relationships by cultivating what you may have learned or what you may have shared.
And just to bring it back to sports, I think, guys, this is practice. Like right now, this is like everyone gets excited about the games.
Yeah.
You don't get to play the game unless you go to practice and hone your. Like these are drills that Jarrod puts himself through. This is structure. This is how he is able to perform because he's doing these kinds of things on a consistent basis.
So with that, one thing I did want to hit and something that is a little bit more just practical, right? And I'll share in transparency here. And kind of that third tactic is managing what's called imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome, for lack of better terms, is feeling like, gosh, I don't know if I belong here. I'll never forget, I was a high school student, I was a freshman in college. I had just gotten on campus at the University of Louisville. And, I was coming from a decent sized high school in my hometown of Columbus, Ohio. But I was around individuals who were way smarter than me, right? I'll never forget, I walked into, it was a business management 101 course. And there were peers of mine who had done internships at Goldman Sachs and had parents who had traveled the world. And I'm like, man, I'm from Columbus, Ohio, never done any of these things, right? And I had this great sense of fear and like, I don't belong here. I'm not smart enough. I'm not good enough. And a phrase that was shared with me from another mentor and someone who's on my board of advisors, when I was sharing these feelings of imposter syndrome and I wasn't good enough to be in these certain spaces, he was talking about self-talk. And he said, Jarrod, what you feed will grow and what you starve will die. Right? When you're talking to yourself and these thoughts that are popping in your head, right? Those moments you feel like, whoa, this is intimidating. This is a little bit above my weight class. And I appreciate that question. I've definitely felt imposter syndrome in my life. Absolutely. Absolutely. Even to this day, I felt imposter syndrome, right? The first time I joined the Rams organization, and I see Aaron Donald, I see Jalen Ramsey, and I see our team president, Kevin Demoff, and I'm like, holy moly, man, this is big time ball. This is big time. How, what am I even supposed to say in this environment, right?
We, as co-founders, we all felt imposter syndrome on Tuesday and the first day, and we're feeling it right now. We've never done this before, campers. Like we've never done a virtual camp. We don't know what we're doing. So we feel this all the time. I just want to I'm yes on imposter syndrome every day.
No doubt. Absolutely true, right? Absolutely true. And one thing that again, that same mentor shared with me, he said, Jarrod, when you feel those feelings, lean into the tension a little bit, lean into it, right? Because you don't have to be running full speed, but if you have a little momentum and a little lean, that can allow you to get through that, right? And shift your focus rather than from that fear to, hey, how can I embrace this opportunity? How can I embrace this opportunity to, in a sense, we're using a boxing analogy here, punch a little bit above my weight class, right? It's a little bit above my pay grade or a little bit above, my expertise, but I'm going to lean into this and I'm going to swing. I'm going to take this at bat and I'm going to swing. Because a lot of times the true value comes not if, when you swing, if you hit the ball or not, but from the swing itself. Why? Because the next time you're at bat, you have that much more confidence. And I can promise you, the Sports Biz Camp team next year when this comes back or later in the fall when it comes back, they'll be that much more confident. Why? Because they took a swing. They took a swing. And I'll never forget, I felt this all the time as a player at Ohio State, right? Played with some of the best athletes in the game, Ezekiel Elliott, Joey Bosa, JT Barrett, Dwayne Haskins, Michael Thomas, Braxton Miller, some incredible athletes, right? We're teammates. And there were times where I was a little scared. I was a little nervous. I'm like, man, do I really want to go in this one-on-one today? I don't know if I want to go one-on-one with Zeke in practice right now. I don't know if I want that, right? Where I felt a little bit imposter syndrome. Man, I wasn't a 5-star recruit. I didn't have a 4.0 coming out of high school, right? I didn't go to this Ivy League institution. I didn't come from wealth. I didn't come from a 2-parent home. I'm not a skin color that's accepted in the workplace all the time. Right? I felt this imposter syndrome. I'm the only one who looks like me in this room. I felt this imposter syndrome, right? But I'm telling you, if you're able to lean into those opportunities, right? And that's where it comes back to the strategy and knowing yourself, understanding where it is you want to go, understanding these things that can trip you up. All these things ladder up, right? There was a great quote. I skipped it in the beginning because I get excited. But it was from Sun Tzu. And he was saying, without strategy without tactics is the slowest way to victory, and tactics without strategy, in a sense, is the noise before defeat. So when you're thinking about these opportunities, you felt that imposter syndrome, that's where you lean back on that strategy and the work that you have put in, and those moments in practice where you've repped this before, right? This is just preparing you for that game. So I know I get excited and that kind of stuff, but I wanted to make sure to hit that point. And so with that, here we go. Boom. So with that, we talked about our tactics, right? We talked about following through on following up. We talked about, in a sense, I'm gonna go back here, managing that imposter syndrome. What do we now do to make sure we follow through on that, right? Because sometimes it's easy to get caught up in the results. It's easy to get caught up in the likes, the retweets, the followers, right? The results sometimes we see from recognition, from success. But guys, what I found is that results are fluid. Results are fluid. Sometimes you can't always trust the results. Sometimes it can be easy to get caught looking at the scoreboard and seeing, oh, I'm down 20 points or I'm up 20 points. It's easy to get caught looking at the scoreboard, but that process, that's what's firm. As Pat mentioned earlier, what you do in practice is only going to be revealed in a game. Right? So that process that you stick to in these milestones and how you're measuring your success, right? That's truly what is going to take you to the next level. That's truly what's going to allow you to not only break into the industry, but maintain success within the industry, right? There's a lot of, a lot of talk is about breaking in. Breaking in is the first step. That's where the journey begins. In order to continue that journey, making sure you track your process, staying true to not only who you are, but what it is you're doing and how you do it. That's where the true measure of your success and these milestones that you can look at comes in. And so with that, we talk about success, right? And measuring that. I want to back up a little bit and say, guys, we first have to define success for ourselves. We have to define what that is. And we got an image here. This is my my girlfriend. Her name is Brittany. We've been together for about 2 years now. This is actually us at a Dodgers game. So we're embracing that Angelino LA culture right now. But guys, my definition of success has changed. It's evolved over the past couple of years. When I was 15, 16, 17, my definition of success was, in a sense, playing in the NFL, which is a great goal. It's a great dream. But as I got older, the more I continued to explore, the more I continued to expand my perspective, the more I continued to not only understand sports business, but understand life. More importantly, not only what I wanted to get out of life, but the type of impact I wanted to have and the type of lifestyle and family I wanted to lead. That definition of success changed a little bit, right? It went from, oh, Jarrod, I want to be this great leader and executive in sports, to Jarrod, I want to be a great boyfriend. I want to be a great leader in general of people, right? Someone who can love and care. And that may not, in a sense, get all the likes, all the press in the world. But what that has done for me is given me a sense of peace, giving me a sense of purpose that sometimes my career didn't always give me, right? And I know this is a career-focused camp, but I wanted to make sure to mention that sometimes that definition of success is beyond just a singular role, right? It can be multiple roles and what that looks like. And so, again, just a review here, guys, that strategy, thinking at a high level of understanding who we are as people, understanding things that can trip us up, and really setting our GPS. Set in your GPS of where it is you want to go and being flexible in how you get there. But then 2, those tactics, right? Assembling our board of directors, following through on follow-up, and then really embracing and managing those moments of imposter syndrome. And those are just 3 tactics, right? There's so many other things, those at just a very high level. And then making sure we measure those and keeping ourselves on track, holding ourselves accountable to that. Wanted to make sure to mention that.
Yeah,
so
and I think kind of like bringing that back to our campers too, like you did an amazing job of walking through how you approach this. I think our campers, their objective and really what we're trying to do for this camp is career readiness, is to put them on the path towards what we want to accomplish, what our success looks like, is a fulfilling career. Mm-hmm. This is the first step to do it, guys. So that's our objective, right? That's success. From a strategy standpoint, you guys are already doing this. Your strategy is to learn. You've taken time out of your summer because you said, for me to have what I want, which is success in a career, I should probably start learning some things from some people that know about it. So kudos to you, pat on the back. Like, you've done that, right? Your strategy is to learn. The Career Exploration Camp is one tactic allowing you to learn. It shouldn't be the only thing that you guys are utilizing to learn. There should be other resources, other people, whatever. But your strategy clearly is personal development and learning. And you guys are employing that by being here. And I think that's just important, to help students understand that they're already putting this into action, Jarrod.
No doubt. I mean, at the very least, just by you guys tuning in, you're already ahead of the game, right? You're already ahead of the game. How can you continue that? How can you keep pushing, keep advancing? Because you're already doing a great job, right? And if there's one thing that I want you guys to understand from this, we talked about a lot of tactical things that can be easy to gravitate towards. I need to be doing more. I constantly feel that feeling myself of, I'm not doing enough. I need to do more. I need to do more. Sometimes it's embracing what you already are doing and understanding that you are already enough. You are already enough yourself. Just continuing along that journey. And I'll tell you what, the number one thing that I have learned is embracing patience. I've been in sometimes such a rush to advance, such a rush to get to that next thing. But guys, the real learning comes when you're able to embrace and be patient and sit and in a sense, receive from a current role or current opportunity. So with that, guys, I'm excited to get into the Q&A. This is my contact information. would absolutely love to stay in touch. If you guys want to come to a Rams game, well, hey, we'll see what we can do. Probably not in 2020 with no fans, but 2021, maybe. We'll see. But guys, this is my contact information. I hope this can be helpful. Really would love to get into Q&A and just dive into that a little bit more. But again, being able to strategize, how can I use this information, apply this to my life through some tactical and practical ways, and to really make sure I measure that, right? I know it's very high level. You said, Jarrod, I thought this was a sports conference. It is very much, right? But these are things that apply across the board that can be truly, truly helpful, and some honest hacks and proven methods to success.
Jarrod, one of the questions that came from Dustin, I'd love for you to hit on. Who or what inspired you to take this career path after your playing career? You clearly love teaching and you love coaching. Was there a specific coach or teacher that really said, at one point you said, that's who I want to be like? The impact they made on me is what I want to do. Just kind of walk us through that.
It's a great question. There's a mentor of mine, colleague of mine now. His name's Jacques McClendon. He is our director of player engagement for the LA Rams. He is someone about 2 years ago really took me under his wing and showed me not only what it was like just by observing him, right? Just by observing him, to what it meant to love people, but also what it meant to, in a sense, build a team, strategize, and have a level of influence that I saw was uncommon, right? And I would watch how he worked. We ended up meeting. I actually sent him a direct message on LinkedIn. It's how we met, right? And then we ended up meeting at the NFL Combine. I drove from Charlotte to Indianapolis, Indiana, just to go have a 30-minute meeting at the time and just learn and better understand his career path, and built that relationship. Ultimately, that's what led me to my current role with the Rams. But he has been a staple for me because, number one, he took me under his wing, but we also cultivated a relationship, right? It started by asking questions, but then transitioned into a relationship, right? It wasn't always him, in a sense, just giving, right? It became more of a mutual relationship. And so it goes back, I think, to identifying those qualities of individuals who, you aspire to be like. At the time, his role and his function really intrigued me. I was really, really curious of what all that entailed, but I also observed him as a person, right? I think the role was only 50% of it. The other 50% was him as an individual. And man, how could I be like that? How could I have that level of impact and influence?
Another question, and I want to provide a little bit of a response too. The question was, how do you approach different people to learn from them to build your board of directors? So that's how Jarrod and I met. Was like Jarrod reached out to me, and I don't know that I'm on his board of directors, but I know that I was here I wanted to help him. I didn't know that I was helping him, but there's a nice guy that reaches out and says, hey, can I have some advice, or can we just touch base? So a lot of research shows that if you ask people for advice, they're going to give it to you, and they're going to do it happily, because part of that is that, hey, can I have some advice? You're basically saying, oh, I must know something that you want to, like, people feel good, right? Like, so I think Jarrod did a really good job and does a good job of that. So for that student, reach out and say, hey, can I have some advice? I see what you're doing. It looks really fun. Can I have some advice about how you did it, why you love it, whatever? So that word advice is really important. I think we'll get a lot of responses. But I think the second part, and this is a kudos to Jarrod. When you meet with Jarrod, the dude takes notes the entire time. He looks at you, he makes really great eye contact, and he listens, but he is taking notes the entire time. I'm a college professor. 2% of my students actually take notes, and it's their job to take notes in my class. So Jarrod approaches that, and also I think his board, as a student. And high school, college, post-college, you're always going to be a student of the game, a student of the industry, whatever. So any other – I want to provide that perspective because, Jarrod, I think you do that better than most people in our interactions. And it was a kudos to you, but I think it's a good model for other students. Any other approaches as far as how you can create that initial connection?
That's a great question. And Pat, man, thank you. I try, man. It's very much an effort of being a lifelong learner. One thing that I've found that has been very successful and helpful for me personally is when you're asking for advice, bringing a potential project or something to the table, right? So I mentioned Jacques McClendon, a mentor of mine, how we met. I said, hey, Jacques, I'm working on a project and I wanted to break into this field of player engagement and athlete development at the time. And I said, hey, Jacques, I've put together a few ideas here on paper. I'd love to hear your perspective and feedback on these ideas, right? And sometimes you may think, Jarrod, I'm just a high school student. Who would want to hear from me what value could I actually bring, and would they actually respond? Guys, I wouldn't underestimate the ability that you have, because the number one thing people in my seat want to hear from right now is actually Gen Z and what you're thinking through Gen Z. So if you were to bring a series of ideas or a proposal or a couple concepts or things you have been working on, maybe it's a project you've done through class, maybe it's something that you've seen, and say, hey, I'd love to hear your thoughts and perspective on this and any additional advice you may have, right? It's something tangible and something practical, right? In addition to everything that Pat shared, that I found to be really, really helpful in getting responses and people willing to respond and share their perspective.
So there was two questions related to you're humble, so you didn't really talk too much about what you do now with the Rams, but there's two separate questions, but I want to dovetail them. Talk about what you do on a daily basis today, and then also share how the rebrand with the Rams and the new stadium has adjusted or changed what you do.
Really, yeah, great question. So in a sense, as a manager of my title is manager of former player marketing and services. Really two functions. Number one, from a marketing standpoint, I'm housed within our marketing department, report up to our chief marketing officer, in a sense, sit at the intersection between our sponsorship, our media, and marketing teams, understanding our current campaigns, our current activations, and our current content strategy to make sure we weave and represent our history and our former players through our content, through our activations, and through our marketing campaigns. That's really what I do. I listen to what's going on within the organization and then think, how can we integrate our history? How can we integrate our former players into that conversation? So anything you see on social, anything we would do from an activation out in the community, anything we would do within our marketing campaigns, right? And to then transition into a bigger campaign of a rebrand and a whole lot of lessons and learning in that, right? How can we storytell our history into the launch of a new brand, right? And we're entering into a new stadium in a new city and transitioning from St. Louis to LA, right? There's so much new within that. How do we, in a sense, storytell our history, yet excite a new fan base? It's been, really two different goals for us as an organization. Number one, how can we, in a sense, inspire what we call Angelinos to shine bright? So that's generating new fans, generating a sense of excitement around what we're doing through the Rams, but also tap into our avid fan base, or those fan base who have been following us for the past 10, 15, 20 years when we were originally in LA before moving to St. Louis, and then from St. Louis moving back to LA. It's been somewhat of a fluid franchise, but those have been our organizational goals. And so for me as a professional, I think about, okay, who are these demographics of fans that we're trying to reach? And then how can we reach them through our alumni, through our former players at a very high level? On the flip side, the services and the engagement comes in by cultivating our community of former players, right? It's one thing to say, hey, here's a great marketing campaign, let's do it. Great. In order to actually execute that, it's probably going to require a level of relationship with our former players who are in a sense doing that. So really the other function of my role is to cultivate our community of former players. And so there's some dynamic personalities in that group. And it's a lot of relationship management and understanding what's most important to our alumni community. No different than an institution or organization, an alumni group, really cultivating that as well. So I know it's a unique title. It's pretty broad, but also, hey, each day is sometimes broad and doing a lot of different functions.
Jarrod, this is day 4, so it's good. You can see students are learning because their questions reflect, key themes throughout. And this is a fun one. We've had 2 separate questions about failure and rejection. So, as a player, obviously you dealt with some failure and rejection, not, reaching your goal and having to adjust success, but also just maybe walk us through talk us through the failure of not making it where you wanted to as a player, and then any other failures or rejections you felt in the business world, and then how clearly you're a motivated, curious person and you're doing great. Congratulations where you're at. How do you push through?
It's a great question. So I can talk about it at a high level and then even on a smaller level. And you mentioned just my athletic career, right? Coming out of high school, I mentioned, I had the chance to play at the University of Louisville. I started as a walk-on. And I called every single Division I institution. So at the time, there was 120 Division I football programs. I called every single one, emailed at the time. This is before, this is way before like overtime and all these social media sites. So I would like mail a DVD disc of my highlight tape, and in a sense got 118 no's. 118 no's. Only 2 schools actually responded to me, and one of them was the University of Louisville. And so took that as an opportunity, right? When dealing with failure, I've really tried to reframe it in my head and focus on the yes, right? There's so many things, so many people that can tell you no in this world. I've really tried to reframe that and focus on the yes, and where is that yes, and how can I build upon that? Because that was tough, right? And then had an incredible football experience through college, pursued the NFL, felt like it was an opportunity that was achievable for me. Ended up not making a roster, had a series of tryouts, but in a sense was told no. And I don't want to blow past this. That was really hard. It was really hard. You know, I faced some hardship in my life, but that was a really, really hard thing for me. And for about 6 months, 7 months almost, I felt like a total failure. Felt like a total failure, and that I didn't know what else I was going to do, right? And I was like, man, this is something I wanted my entire life, and now I don't really have the opportunity to do it anymore. And so what I had to do when I faced that level of rejection, I had to, in a sense, reframe my definition of success. I had to go back and really revisit that strategy and say, hey, there's more to life than just football. It's been a huge part of my life. It still is. Still love the game, right? But I had to reframe and revisit my definition of success to then work through that. And that took time, and it wasn't overnight, and it's actually still ongoing. I'm 5 years retired, and there's still days where I miss football, right? But I also begin to see those other yeses, those other opportunities to explore, those other opportunities that have been presented to me. And so that's been hard. And then on a smaller level, faced rejection. Earlier this week, I pitched an idea that I truly believed in internally here with the Rams. I put together an entire about 25-page slide deck, put together a market analysis, research behind it, fan data behind it, this whole presentation, right? And I pitched it to my supervisor and said, and she said, thanks, Jarrod. No. You know, so, and I'm like, man, okay, I spent 20 hours on this project. How do I in a sense recover from this? How do I, where do I go from here? And again, had to revisit that definition of success and say, what have I learned from this? What have I learned from this? What can I take from this? And how could I, in a sense, be better or more informed next time, right? Because for like we shared earlier, if you look at the scoreboard, those results are going to be fluid. Sometimes you may be up, sometimes you may be down, but it's that process and returning back to that process that has really helped me recenter and in a sense help regulate those emotions that I feel, because I've felt the disappointment, felt the sadness, felt the rejection, all of that, right? But to regulate that and return back to, okay, here's what I have, here's how we can go forward, like let's keep going. I've had to really look back at that process.
So as we start to kind of close down, put yourself, so it's a two-part question. First part is put yourself back, high school Jarrod. What do you wish you would have known then that you know now? And then second part, tactically, if you are, these are hard questions, sorry, but I know you're up for the challenge. You're attending this camp as a high school student. What are you doing immediately out of this camp to keep the momentum going?
Two great questions. What would I do now? What would I say to my high school self now? I would say, number one, it's okay to fail. It's okay to fail, right? I came from this environment where failure was not an option, right? I had to succeed, wanted to do well. I put a lot of pressure on myself, dealt with a lot of anxiety as an athlete, right? And to, in a sense, keep up an image or keep up kind of with the Joneses or what everybody else was doing, or keep up with peers or teammates, right? Who were experiencing success. And for me, felt so much pressure to keep up with that. And I would say, it's okay to truly be you. And one of the things, I mentioned it briefly earlier, but one of the things Coach Kerry Combs, who's a defensive coordinator at Ohio State, he was a coach I worked for at Ohio State, he would always say before games, fearlessly be yourself, because who you are is good enough. And we would always laugh and joke and be like, all right, why are you giving us a rah-rah? But he would say, fearlessly, without regret, be yourself, because who you are is good enough. And that stuck with me. And it didn't actually hit probably until a couple of years ago when I really thought about it. And I said, man, that's good. That's good. And I know Cole put in there, not former NFL player Kerry Collins, Coach Kerry Combs, defensive coordinator at Ohio State, said that. And
He's at
still
the Titans now, right?
say again?
Isn't he at the Titans now?
No, he went back to Ohio State.
Oh, he did? Okay.
Yeah. And then just the second part of your question, what would I do now immediately after this camp to keep up with the momentum? Two things. Number one, I would go back and look at who I heard from this whole week, right? I would go back and revisit, okay, who did I hear from? Who are the people in these roles? Because a lot of times we aspire to get to the role, but we don't consider the people